Recently, at a session with my therapist, she asked me to try to remember what my first memory of my life is. I sat quietly for a minute, and two distinct early memories showed up. One was seeing my baby sister for the first time at the hospital through a window. And the other was turning cartwheels in my yard on a summer day after I was baptized. I'm sure there are earlier memories, but the day I was baptized at New Lisbon Christian Church in New Lisbon, Indiana, stands out to me as clearly as any memory of my childhood. I knew on that day, as an 8-year-old fresh off of a good week of church camp, and who had passed what we called the Age of Accountability test with my minister, that Jesus was real and he was near. For the next decade, I would spend my time coming of age in that small Midwestern farm town. I spent a lot of time at that little country church where I was baptized, and it was full of some of the best people I know. They always show up at the hospital and the funeral home. They know a good casserole can make a suffering family less lonely. It was the beginning of my understanding that Jesus is found in the midst of showing up for your people and letting your people show up for you. But even as they begin to plant and nurture seeds that would turn into a deep faith, I was really skeptical. Some things just didn't add up. For instance, I had finished the iconic middle school girl book of the time, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, by Judy Blume. I had so many questions, and I thought Sunday school must be the perfect place to ask those questions. But my Sunday school teacher, with her hand on her heart in shock, answered my first question by saying, "JoEllen, it sounds to me like you don't need to be reading books that aren't the Bible or written by believers." A couple of years later, I was watching the news with my grandma, which was one of my very favorite things to do. There was a presidential candidate by the name of Bill Clinton, and he was explaining his plan for education and housing and healthcare. And I really thought they kind of sounded like pretty good ideas, or at least they sounded like things we ought to be talking about at church. So back to Sunday school I went with my questions about my faith and this new world of politics that I had been exposed to and what I was seeing on the news and in the world. JoEllen, said one of my very favorite people at church, "Christians cannot vote for Democrats. Did you know he's a Democrat?" I didn't know that. Then they all prayed for me. Even as I was working so hard to be a good Christian, respect my elders, and find my place in this community, Jesus was stirring up a deep longing inside me. I had questions about everything. I had intuition that maybe there was more to the stories that I heard and knew. I read the Bible every morning and the Courier-Times newspaper every afternoon. I knew who was in the hospital, who had been arrested for things like drunk driving. I was enthralled that this information was available in the newspaper, and then later sometimes discussed in much more detail on the phone by my mom and the other prayer chain ladies from church. Information, community, the way decisions impacted real people, how stories got told and repeated. All of these things fascinated me from my earliest memories. The summer before my senior year, I asked to go on a mission trip to Jamaica. I did not know another soul going. I do not remember how I found out about it or even what made me want to go. But I begged and pleaded and raised the money myself. Ignored my mom's crying when my dad finally said yes. And it was on that trip that I met a student who worked in the admissions office at a place called Milligan College. I had never heard of Milligan College. College, even as a rising senior, wasn't really on my radar. No one in my family went to college. I had never heard of AP classes or dual enrollment. But when I read those brochures my friend mailed to me, I knew immediately I wanted to be there. My parents were skeptical. They were worried. People in my community didn't go 7 hours away from home to go to college. But once we visited, I knew they were going to let me go. And I knew, as cheesy as it might sound, that my life was going to change. I decided I wanted to major in psychology. I had no idea what psychology was, but I wanted to major in it. The admissions counselor said, well, we have a communication scholarship you might be able to get. Done. I was officially a communication major, and I certainly had absolutely no idea what that meant. But that Christian liberal arts education did change me. And in one particular class that I'll never forget, I began my vocational path. It was called Introduction to News Writing. The professor was quirky and passionate. We learned about interviewing, information and context, and how to write a lead in 35 words or less. But the thing that still sticks out to me was a sign above the professor's office door that said, "Gossip is not more Christian than journalism." I could not stop thinking about that. Could journalism be a Christian calling? A real vocation? Finally, here it was, this place to explore and think about how information and questions and being skeptical and the needs of communities and the idea that powerful people should have to tell the truth about how they make the rules and spend your money, that all of this might actually be a faithful way to live and to work. All of those questions that had started forming in my young mind in a small town and in that little church were worth asking. Here I had the chance to start to integrate my love of Jesus and what he was up to in the world with my love of what I now know was journalism. At the same time on campus that I was demanding the dean of students explain to me, the student newspaper editor, if the baseball coach was in fact fired because the baseball team frequented the local bars, I was also in a class called Christ and Culture in the religion department. There we were reading books and having discussions about what it might mean for us to love mercy and to do justice. My mind, my heart, my imagination were blown wide open by the faculty, the classes, the friends at Milligan. By the time I graduated, I was a proud 22-year-old reporter at the Elizabethton Star in Elizabethton, Tennessee. I attended school board meetings and zoning hearings and Little League championship games. I learned all the scanner codes. I got to write about the region's heroin problem. Sometimes I had to help type in the recipes if Rosalie was behind. A lot of my friends were in seminary at that time in my life. I would meet them for coffee, and I was fascinated by their discussions and their questions and ideas. I was sometimes jealous that they seemed to be getting to do the real work of Jesus in the world. While they were in church serving on Sunday, I was often the low woman on the totem pole, working the weekend cops and breaking news shift in the newsroom. I started to wonder sometimes if what I was doing mattered. But so often, Jesus quietly reminded me that it did matter. When children were dead and I had to go to the scene, I felt him with me crying on the way back to the newsroom. When I was furious that people with power over the vulnerable in our community were lying, I felt him with me, telling me that anger can be righteous and that change is possible if the truth can be told. My faith and my desire to follow Jesus were lining up with my desire to tell stories of the humanity I encountered, to reveal wrongdoing, to hold powerful people accountable, and to celebrate those who made our community so special. Verifying facts, giving people the information they need to make good decisions, offering the information that can inform and spark debates about important issues and problems in our communities. These things did, in fact, seem more Christian to me than gossip. My early career was spent reporting on Daily Deadline, earning a graduate degree. I landed a dream job in an award-winning newspaper in Indiana. I worked for these crazy smart women who worked harder than anyone I've known, and they agreed to let me try to be a new mom and a journalist. Long before working at home was a thing, they let me try a couple days a week at home as a reporter. And even as my career was advancing, I was sometimes lonely in these efforts to know Jesus and be a daily news reporter. There were times when I felt like my professional colleagues didn't get my faith, and when my church community didn't get my profession. I was a new mom in a church where most moms stayed home full-time. I question myself, my calling, the decisions I was making. I didn't really fit anywhere during that time. And soon, my life as a mom and a reporter was about to get more interesting. I was expecting twin daughters. I worked out an arrangement with my editor to come back and work when I was ready, and I thought that was my plan. Then I got a phone call from my mentor and professor from Milligan. He told me a college named Olivet Nazarene University was hiring a journalism professor, and he had given them my name as a candidate. I did not know what a Nazarene was. I did not know how to be a professor. But on a golf cart tour of that campus, because I was so pregnant with twins that the department chair insisted on driving me around all day in a golf cart, I knew Jesus was up to something new for me I never saw coming. In my interviews on campus that day, I was just pretending to be confident. Really, I was scared and completely unsure of my ability to teach. But I was also deeply moved and deeply excited about the idea of bringing my love and knowledge of journalism and communication to a Christian community who wanted to use those skills and knowledge as part of their work to help usher in the kingdom of God on earth. The long story, sort of short, is that I took the job, became a full-time college professor with 3-month-old twins and a 3-year-old. I learned to write courses. I got a crash course in FERPA. I had to grade a lot. I learned to edit student newspaper stories. There were so many meetings. Making the move from a newsroom to a college classroom was sometimes lonely and frustrating. Missed my life at a daily newspaper and sometimes wondered, had I made a mistake? But it wasn't long before these students started showing up in my office. They had so many questions. Is the media really liberal? Could they be journalists and Christians? What if policies and politics really did matter to the local communities and people that they cared about? I began to have this sense that conversations with students could be sacred. I wasn't just teaching AP style and how to punctuate quotes. I was witnessing the calling and forming of disciples, and I remembered when their questions were mine, and I knew it was precious to bear witness to that. Because of several family reasons, my family decided to make a move to Nashville. Just as I was settling into this new calling of teaching, I thought I had to give it up. I was mad. I was mad at my family. I was mad at God. But listen to this. One afternoon, I was sitting in my office at Olivet. My phone rang. I answered. And a woman with a powerful yet calm and beautiful Southern voice said something like this. "Hello, JoEllen. My name is Lena Haggai Welch. I'm the chair of the Department of Communication Studies at Trevecca Nazarene University. And I've been told that one of the world's best journalism professors is moving to Nashville. I have been praying about starting a journalism program at Trevecca. Would you like to get coffee with me when you get to town?" I could not believe it. It was like God just picked up the phone and called me. I didn't know then that there's this sort of sophisticated Nazarene communication system and that one of my colleagues at Olivet had reached out to Dr. Welch to tell her I was coming to town. Knowing that now doesn't change the fact that Jesus was still leading me. In the 12 years I've been in Nashville, I have found my home, both professionally and in the church. I've landed in a parish that has taught me the beauty and for me the necessity of the liturgy and the rhythms of a church year. For 8 years, I've met monthly with an Ignatian spiritual director and 3 other ladies in a spiritual direction group. Here, I have been able to witness the mystery of God at work in prayer and shared life with God's people. I am still learning that silence is where I can meet Jesus, and that time always guides and informs my work and my words. Working with the diverse students on this campus challenges me and inspires me every day. Training journalism, training journalists, and communicators feels as important as it's ever been to me. In these days of unrest and division, shouts of fake news, conspiracy theories that pass for facts, when racist systems and structures continue to harm our brothers and sisters, I know that the courage of good journalists and the work they do is, in fact, kingdom work. Watching God doing the work of creating truth tellers and storytellers on this campus is a privilege I don't take lightly. I really believe in the power of good journalism to call us to repentance and fill us with hope. That's always what good and true stories do. I believe that ethical communication can heal division and can open us all up to new ideas and perspectives. And that learning to listen also means learning to be empathetic, both to our friends and our enemies. And so as you sit in chapel today, you are likely filled with your own questions about who you are, how what you're learning could be used, how your faith might inform the work you're called to do in the world. And I can tell you this based on my own experience. Time in prayer with Jesus, being brave enough to be in community with those who are different from you, asking those hard questions of your pastors and professors, following your interests, curiosities, and questions. These are the things that I suspect Jesus is also using to write your story. Show up as who you are. You are loved and needed, and I know God is near and at work creating your testimony.